Trump presidency is going to usher in less burdensome regulation. Gary Gensler, who's chair of the SEC, will be gone. He's very disliked among Bitcoin proponents in the crypto industry. They kind of accuse him of regulation by enforcement, just essentially just going after all these companies and trying to impose these massive fines instead of actually giving them clear guidance, rules of the road. And so there's optimism that Trump's going to kind of embrace this industry.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by economics reporter Zach Halaschak. Zach, what's the latest news with inflation?
Yeah, so inflation actually ticked up for the first time in 7 months. According to the Consumer Price Index, which is kind of the most watched inflation gauge. So now it's at 2.6%. So it's moving further away from that 2% target that the Fed is kind of aiming for. It got down as low as 2.4% in September, but last month it ticked up to 2.6%. So obviously not good news for the economy overall. Unwelcome news for President-elect Donald Trump, who's going to be inheriting the White House.
And he just won an election in part over inflation, and now after ticking down, it's ticked back up.
Exactly, and that's, it kind of just shows that some, I think, in the Biden administration, even and Vice President Kamala Harris, they're kind of arguing that the inflation wave's over. We don't have to really, we stamped it out. But this shows that there's some lingering stickiness to it, and it's not something that's going to go away in the next month and a half or two between now and when Trump is sworn in. So I think that'll be an interesting storyline to see play out next year, especially how the Fed sort of handles this with Trump, who's known for kind of quarreling very publicly with Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. The Fed's independence, there's a lot of different kind of storylines that are going to
He's not going to be a big fan of interest rate hikes, President Trump.
No.
Yeah.
And right now the Fed, I think it was last week, just cut interest rates for the second time in its cycle of starting to cut interest rates. And they might have to pause that cutting pattern and kind of hold for a bit as they kind of see what's causing this stickiness and inflation. One of the biggest things pushing up was shelter costs, so housing prices. That was behind, I think, over half of the increase this past month. So, we'll see. I mean, 2.6 is still manageable, but you never want to see it trending up.
What's the outlook for cryptocurrency in a new Trump administration?
Well, I mean, just before the election, since then, it's kind of increased by, I think, close to 40%. Last I checked, Bitcoin was around $90,000, per coin or per token, which is a huge increase. I think there's a lot of optimism in the crypto industry that a Trump presidency is going to usher in less burdensome regulation. Gary Gensler, who's chair of the SEC, will be gone. He's very disliked among Bitcoin proponents in the crypto industry. They kind of accuse him of regulation by enforcement, just essentially just going after all these companies and trying to impose these massive fines instead of actually giving them clear guidance, rules of the road. And so there's optimism that Trump's going to kind of embrace this industry, and he did on the campaign trail. If you remember back in, I think it was May, he spoke at the Libertarian National Convention and kind of had a fulsome embrace of crypto and of Bitcoin and vowed to free Ross Ulbricht and just all these kind of talking points that someone who's pro-crypto would like to see. So I think it'll be interesting to see the follow-through on that, kind of what comes of that. I know it appears on track to have a Republican majority in both the Senate and the House. What legislation will be passed out of the new Congress and with the Republican administration in the White House, I think there could be some interesting crypto legislation to come out of this. So yeah, to be seen, but it's good news for the crypto industry, and you see Bitcoin and other tokens increasing in value as a reaction to that.
So there's going to be a lot going on next year on the tax front, and one of the hot issues is the SALT deductions. How does the slim Republican House majority affect the outcome on that?
Yeah, so I mean, next year is going to be a big tax year. All the expiring provisions in the 2017 Trump tax cuts, known as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they're all coming undone. So Congress has to come up with this big fiscal package through a process called reconciliation. But one tangent on that is in 2017, that tax law capped deductions on state and local taxes, $10,000. So that was called the SALT cap, if you see that. You have lawmakers in high tax states like New York, California, who really want to see that cap raised or completely eliminated because it disproportionately affects them, rather than someone, say, in like Oklahoma, who doesn't have to worry about that deducting those taxes. And traditionally, Republicans have not wanted to raise that cap. I mean, most of the caucus would not like to see it, raised any further, or even see no deductions allowed. And but you have such a slim majority, or slated to be a slim majority in the House, maybe a few votes, that just a few lawmakers, if they wanted, they could kind of form a voting bloc and just refuse to vote for anything unless it includes a negotiated fix for them, maybe raising the cap to $20,000 instead of $10,000 or something like that. So I think what you're going to see, and these lawmakers are very politically dependent on doing something with the SALT cap. You have people like Lawler in New York who, they might not win re-election if they don't get some relief for their voters. So I think you're probably going to see some changes to the SALT cap as part of this tax package. Trump has actually just this past summer endorsed it. He said he offered, I think he called it like relief for them, but he didn't give an exact number or what that entails. So he left open a lot of wiggle room for negotiators on Capitol Hill. So yeah, it's just one piece of the puzzle for the tax package, and it's going to be quite the journey to get to the end result here.
A big block of salt sounds pretty biblical.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you, Zach.
Yep.
You can read Zach and the rest of our policy team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.